Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. It's time to show what we've been up to. So let's do a quick round on what we're going to show. I think we have the login stuff and the Go Sitter work. Who wants to go first? Yuval?
Sure, I'll go first. You got a couple things here. All right. So what I'm going to be showing today is the new login flow that we have. The existing flow is basically a homebrewed thing that we had set up with email validation and all that. And now we're going to let people just use OAuth. So it's going to be a lot more convenient and also in the future more secure. Yeah, I've got my own little branch of Clotho. This is about to hit main, but not quite in there. And if I do Clotho, actually, let me go into sample apps, for example. Sample apps, yes, microservices. If I run Clotho dot, it's going to tell me that I'm not logged in. And so what I need to do now is I'm going to do Clotho login. It'll open me up to this page. And I'm actually going to use for this one Google, just a simple OAuth Google. Click that. I'm already logged in. I've already previously created an account. If not, it would have asked me to authorize. And now I'm logged in. And that's it. Now I actually haven't compiled the TypeScript into JavaScript. So this isn't going to do much, but you can see that it's giving me now I need to provide the app and I would do Clotho config and all that kind of stuff. I'm logged in. That's it. Easy breeze.
I love Easy Breezy because Easy Breezy for users means you can get started quickly. For context, the reason we have a login phase, there's two types. One is for the open source version and one is for the pro version, which we detail more on the website. But one of the key things we do is gather analytics beyond just the tiers of Clotho on which capabilities are being used and which features are more often needed or into the applications, the structure of topologies, but without actually looking at anything related to the specific application. It very much helps us narrow and focus and understand where the biggest needs and where the biggest kind of focus area is. And it's one of the key reasons we have a login phase. We're also working on some portal capabilities, which we'll talk about later on, that would need you to be authenticated in. So it only looks at your things that are relevant to you. So that's the reasoning there.
There's also anonymous statistics and analytics that we use to help better the product. Now, obviously, you can always log in multiple and stuff like that. If you don't want to share things or whatever, but that kind of information helps us find errors, bugs, places that aren't as great.
And yeah, that's an important bit. In the open source version, you don't have to log in. You can just use the local login, which will bypass all of this. So it's not necessary, but we would prefer to have it just so we can get the telemetry. Cool. Thanks, Yuval.
Yeah.
Looking good. And Jordan, that you guys worked on it.
Yeah, Jordan actually did most of the legwork. I just provided a little bit of the polish at the very end. So props to Jordan.
Don't give me all the credit. It's a joint effort.
Thanks, folks.
Clotho Wix next.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So let me share my screen again. And this is really more of a Clotho developer feature for us developers working on the actual source code of Clotho. It's potentially useful for anybody who is using Clotho, but really meant for kind of working on it. That said, if there's any contributors who are thinking about it, getting into the code base, this might be useful. So what Clotho Witch is, you can basically think of it almost as high-end, but for Clotho. So you've got different installations of Clotho. This lets you manage them all and isolate them all within that. To start with, I'll just show you my Clotho Witch list. So this shows me all the environments that I've installed already. You can see I have a few here. I've got this brew one from our homebrew. These are all just names that I came up with. So I've got release OSS, release pro, source OSS, source pro. And you can see that for the releases in OSS, they actually show you which version. And for the OSS, the source based ones, they actually show you the branch that you're on and also the commit. So you can actually see that. And in fact, if I go to, for example, r/Clotho, this is my branch. If I create a file here and then I do Clotho Witch again, you'll see that it'll actually tell me that this one is a dirty branch. So lets you really easily see exactly kind of what's going on. If I just do Clotho Witch without any arguments, then it tells me the branch that I'm on right now. And if I do Clotho Witch and provide, let's say, this Clotho Pro, actually, I'll do the release pro. That way I don't have to recompile. Then you'll see, first of all, if I just do Clotho Witch, it tells me this one. And then if I do Clotho, you can see that this is the release version. The other nice thing about this is, so we have a new thing. This is how you do the update streams. We have a way of setting options. And so if I go to my Clotho directory you see we have this options file. And if I look at this options file, you can see it says hello. Not a very interesting one. What's neat though is that Clotho Witch actually isolates your options files within each installation. So again, I'm on the Pro one, right? I do Clotho Witch, it says I'm on Rel Pro. If I do Clotho Witch Rel OSS, for example, and then I do cat up, you can see that this is actually a different options file. And so it's just swapped it out. Where this is all happening is we have the Clotho Witch directory within the Clotho directory, and this has all of the information. So it's got my environments. That's where basically I store, I do a tree here. My environments is where I store my various options files. It's got Clotho binaries, which is basically a cached version of the binary per repo that you have. So that when you call Clotho, basically if the Clotho this uses, if this is a source file, will automatically recompile it for you. So you're always using exactly what's in your source. But if that hasn't changed, then it'll use the cached version. And then versions, this is actually shows that is where we actually have each one of the versions that you've installed set up. We do Clotho, which I won't go through this whole workflow here, but sorry, I wanted help. This shows you all the options that you have. You can use one. That's what I've been showing. I've been showing these two and also this. You can also rename them. You can remove environments. You can add one. Actually, when you add one, you can either point it to a source repository that you have locally, or you can point it to a binary that you've downloaded, or you can actually point it to an HTTPS URL of our Clotho download, and it'll automatically download it and install it and all that kind of stuff for you. It's a pretty handy way to switch between releases and sources and different versions and all that kind of stuff, while also maintaining different options files for each one of them.
Cool.
That's it.
It would be great if some like a contributor would generalize this. It looks useful beyond just Clotho. So it would be nice to have that generalized into its own.
Yeah, a lot of what it does is Clotho specific. Recompiling definitely could be generalized. Switching around the options files, you would have to figure out some way, like a hook for swapping things in and out. It's definitely possible, but it would be a little bit more complicated than it is now. But
Awesome.
Yeah.
We didn't show the stream stuff, by the way. We should definitely show the stream stuff.
okay, yeah, I can show that now. And for which I think I'm on Rel OSS, right? Yep. So I can show that now. This is a way to set your update stream. So what an update stream is in general in Clotho is exactly what it sounds like. We've got our updates and those are in different streams. And we've got one for our open source and one for our pro. And then they're also by version. And so one of the things that I can do is here, if I do, I'll clear this. And so one of the things I can do is if I run Clotho version, you'll see that I'm on the 061. And there's no pro here. So that tells me that I'm on the open source version. If I do Clotho set update stream, and then what I want is it's pro latest. There we go. It tells me that I have a new update version. So if I do Clotho update, that's the update. Now Clotho version will show that it's on pro. That lets you upgrade. It also lets you downgrade. So if I wanted to do the open source version, it's called open. So open latest. There we go. Back to here. And then lastly, this also lets you pin versions. So right now I've been showing open latest. You can also do v0.6.0. And then if I do, okay. Yeah.
Love it. That's awesome. So versioning, switching between open source and the pro version, pinning versions, and it's all from the CLI. Love it. Thanks about the sitter.
Yep. Go tree sitter is what we use to parse source files and ultimately help make transformations in the specific and targeted places that we want to make those transformations while leaving the rest as is. And so the change that we made to it, there are two of them. The first one is to support pattern matching, which is a feature that is commonly available in the other language bindings like in Rust and in Node.js, which is, let me show screen. So here's an example of one of our tree sitter queries. And the pattern matching you can see here is this match directive. So what we're saying is we want this pair key, we want it to match controllers, the exact string controllers.
Can you zoom in a little, Gordon?
300%. Is that fine? Yeah. So the pattern matching here matches the pair key to exactly controllers. You can see down here the type of code that it's supposed to match. And you can see the pair keys down here. So this will be a pair key. This will be each one of these lines will be a pair key, or sorry, a pair, and then the key of the pair. So it'll go imports, controllers, providers. And because of this pattern matching, it'll only return this pair from the query instead of all query. By enabling that, it makes us have to write less. So instead of 3-4 lines in Go, it's just one in the query. We can also leverage like templating in the future. We don't have any examples, so we're going to do that now. But instead of just a raw query, it could instead be a template that we fill in specific values that we want, and it should make searching and traversing code much easier to implement. And then the second feature that our fork has is that when you try to get the content of a C node, before you used to pass in the whole program because the nodes only saved the byte offsets of like when it started and when it finished. So you needed to pass in the whole program to be able to actually get the string content of what the code is. And that was unique to the Go bindings. In the Node.js bindings, they actually have the content in the actual tree. Nodes have references to the tree that they live in, so that when you get the content of the node, it just looks up program in its tree. So our fork does the same thing, stores the program in the tree. And so now these node contents don't have any arguments. And so we don't have to pass around the program pretty much everywhere we do it. And this ends up saving like a lot. You can see we use this function 151 times, and all the functions that use it would have had to have the programs passed in, reduce the complexity of our functions pretty much all throughout the code, just removing one parameter and just cleaned all of that up. And so it's much more manageable to determine and resolves the desync issue where sometimes as you're modifying the code, like in the plugins, the source code that you're working on no longer matches what the node was based off of. And so if you pass the wrong program content to the node's content function, then you would have gotten incorrect results. Now it will always be correct because you cannot change the source that the node looks up to determine its content. And so that helped a lot of complexity we had around making sure that those were kept in sync. We no longer have to do that. And so it is much simpler now. There's still a lot of places we need to clean up because of accommodations that we've made for those things. But now that we've been moved on to the fork, we can start chipping away at that and simplifying things.
Cool. And this is based on a different Golang fork that wasn't in their main, wasn't.
Not exactly. I sold the unit tests. I originally based it off of it with the unit tests and everything, but I actually found that their implementation was pretty flawed in a couple of different ways and was producing the correct result. I added additional test cases to cover places where it was incorrect and basically rewrote the implementation, which was essentially just a port of the Rust implementation.
Cool. And is that available for people to use now?
Yeah, it's a public fork. It's just under Clodo platform / Go tree sitter.
Cool.
It's not like you still import it, as you can see here, as the original Smecker Go tree sitter. You have to use the replace directive in your Go mod because we're going to try and propose a PR to the original repository so that we don't have to maintain a fork. That said, this content is API backwards incompatible change. They may be hesitant to accept it. Additionally, these being ignored and then now getting parsed is potentially a backwards compatible thing as well. And there may be some reservations in upstreaming. And if that's the case, then update the package to be separate.
Perfect. Questions?
Because nodes reference the content themselves, does that mean that when you're actually running that the memory allocation is much higher because we're not passing around the program everywhere?
The memory allocation should be about the same because we only cloned the content when we were making modifications, which we continue to do. Just instead of storing the reference to the original in like outside of the tree, it's now just stored inside. And so memory impact should be equivalent.
I think the way we were using it, there was basically no time that we ever have a node that we don't also have the original source. So even though technically their two life cycles were different, in practice, they were always the same. And so now we've just formalized that.
And just makes it plain easier to use.
Love it. Easier to use music.
We actually broke some of our unit tests because our queries, we wrote in many cases with these pattern matching saying eventually we'll support it. But there were some cases where it didn't match up. Either we didn't update the pattern, which had no impact because it wasn't being parsed, or like a unit test would go over these pairs for this example, and the unit test would say, I expect to get 3. And now it gets only 1 because it only returns the correct one.
Perfect. Thanks, Gordon. Have a lovely Friday, friends. Thank you for all the hard work.
All right. Have a good weekend.